With many such parables, he spoke to them as they were able to hear it. He did not speak to them except in parables. All right, so Jesus told a lot of parables. If you showed up to hear him speak in a packed crowd by the shore of the Sea of Galilee, you probably would have heard one, or maybe many. They were one of the primary ways that he taught, one of the primary ways that he held the attention of people, captivated their imaginations. But what are parables exactly? Are they moral teachings, riddles, allegories, entertainment, jokes? They might be a little bit like any of those things, but the word parable in Greek literally points to something thrown alongside something else. A juxtaposition of one thing beside another, this alongside that. And what seems to make a parable work, maybe what seems to make a parable, is that the juxtaposition of those two things is a strange one. You don't expect to find these things next to each other very often. You know how this works. The Samaritan turns out to be the good one, offering help to a wounded man whom a priest and Levite had passed by on the other side of the road. It's a parable of righteousness thrown alongside common-held prejudices. A father does not chastise his son and berate him for insulting him and wasting all his money. He runs out to embrace him. It's a parable of mercy thrown alongside a common understanding of consequences, of right and wrong. A vineyard owner pays the same amount to the workers who toiled for an hour in his fields as he does to those who toiled the whole day. It's a parable of generosity thrown alongside fairness. You get the idea. In all of these well-known parables, you've got an unexpected juxtaposition of things. And when you hold them close together, they generate some energy, some heat, something that makes you want to talk, maybe makes you want to think a little differently about what you believe and how you live your life. Parables run on the energy of the unexpected, except when it comes to this one. Once upon a time, there was a seed, and someone scattered it on the ground. Some time passed, and one day the seed sprouted and grew all by itself, and it was good for harvesting. You're waiting for a punchline, right? Or you're waiting for something strange to happen, for the farmer to do something out of the ordinary, or for the weather to change, or for a thief to show up, or for the grain to open its mouth and start talking. But you can wait all you want, because that's it. That's the parable. Several of Jesus' parables show up in more than one gospel. Several of them are picked up by more than one author to share with the communities they're writing for. But not this one. I don't know why it's only in Mark, but it could be that it is not the flashiest of all parables. It doesn't have very much going on in terms of characters or plot, and in the story itself, there's no real strange juxtaposition of things. Nothing here seems very out of place next to anything else. What makes it a parable is the way that Jesus begins the story. The kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground, he says. So there's the one thing beside another. The kingdom of God next to an ordinary seed in the ground. And when you put those two things next to one another, they actually do generate plenty of energy and heat. Because I imagine that most of us do not think of the kingdom or the reign of God like this at all. The reign of God is what Jesus came to proclaim and teach and even embody, the Gospels tell us. He came to show what the fullness of God's life looks like. The reign of God is God's dream for the world. It's the values and joys and promises of God made manifest. It's good news to the poor, and release to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind. It's the great vision that's meant to pull us forward. It's kind of the main thing for Jesus. So if you hang around Jesus much, you hear a lot about the reign of God. And you learn that part of following Jesus is working for this reign, adopting its values, looking out for the people that it lifts up, advocating and praying for the kind of change that it promises. You learn that being a Christian is about helping to bring this reign into being in our world. You learn that the reign of God is maybe like a wrestling match that you struggle through with all your might, or like a tower that you build shoulder to shoulder with others, or like a puzzle that you strain to figure out, or like an enormous piece of IKEA furniture with a very complicated instruction manual. You learn that the reign of God is something you do, something that depends on your sweat and your strain and your effort. And then along comes a parable about a seed planted in the ground that simply and automatically grows, you know not how. And that seems to fly in the face of our common understanding. What kind of a kingdom is this? I don't know if you did something like this when you were in first grade, but 30-some years ago, I remember my class planting seeds in little half milk cartons and setting them by the windows in the classroom. The teacher said the seeds would not grow overnight, but of course we checked the next day anyway. Maybe she was wrong, after all. Maybe my seed will be the magic one, the exception to the rule. But no, the next day there was nothing but dirt visible in each little box, and the day after that, and the day after that, until we almost stopped expecting anything at all to happen. Until we watered just because the teacher told us to and because it had become a habit. And we got used to the appearance of that little square of earth with nothing much in it. Until one day there it was, something tiny and tender and green, pushing up through the soft layers of soil and beginning to unfold for the first time. We were thrilled. The kingdom of God is as if someone would sleep and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow. He does not know how. Maybe that's a little part of what this parable means to do. Maybe it means to show us that something beautiful and wholly beyond our control unfolding in front of our eyes. Maybe the kingdom is like that, like a child showing up in class on the day that the seed finally breaks through that top layer of dirt. Okay, now wait a minute though, you may be saying. Classrooms and growing seeds are nice and all, but are you really saying I'm supposed to believe this? That with all that is a mess in the world, with all that's been trampled in our common life, with all the vulnerable lives that are disrespected and damaged, am I really supposed to believe that the kingdom of God just comes? That it doesn't depend on me? In his book, Making Sense of the Cross, which several of us in the congregation read this last Lent, David Lose compares the cross to a sculpture in a museum, and the various ways theologians have understood or explained the cross as different angles or vantage points on that single work of art. Each perspective, he says, is important and has something to offer, because without them, we would only have part of the picture. I think that analogy works really well for the cross, and I think it works just as well for what we're talking about. Because the reign of God is one truly enormous sculpture, and this is far from the only parable, far from the only angle we have on it. In other parables, Jesus definitely emphasizes our need to join in the work, to risk, and to seek, and to build. Of course we need that angle. We are meant to feed the hungry and accompany the refugee and speak up when the Bible is used to support unjust and inhumane actions. Of course we are meant to participate in the work of the kingdom. We need that angle, but we also need this one, reminding us that finally God's kingdom will come, no matter what. Like a seed that takes root and simply does what a seed was always meant to do. I think we need to pause today and deeply take in this angle on the kingdom. Because while Christians are certainly called to working, we are not defined by anxious doing. We're not defined by worry. We're not defined by fears that our efforts won't be enough. Christians are always defined by grace. And in the end, I think that's what this parable is. A reminder that finally God's greatest dream, God's greatest work is still a gift, still grace, through and through. The kingdom will come like a seed that sprouts while you sleep. We know not how. Jesus told so many parables that he became one. I don't know who said that, but I like it very much. He himself is the deepest wisdom thrown alongside what looked to all the world like foolishness. He is the fullness of time thrown alongside our minutes and our hours. He is the greatest power thrown alongside self-giving love. Don Saliers says that Jesus' life and death might be the greatest parable we have of all. And there are lots of ways you could tell it, of course. And today, maybe we tell it this way, as the story of a seed full of promise that found its way into the dark earth, and out of that dark sprouted to new life that makes a home for anyone who needs a place to rest in the shade. Despite everything, despite neglect and apathy and human failure and cynicism with religion and our imperfect attempts at following in Jesus' footsteps, despite everything, the kingdom that he came to embody continues to grow and flourish and give shelter. It's as if grace keeps making a way, reaching down into the earth and up into the sky. It's as if the kingdom keeps coming. You know not how. Amen.